Hello. Welcome to the Horror Stories channel. If you like horror stories, then this scary story about the morgue is just for people like you. The story that happened to the main character seems incredible, but that's all that really happened. I guess if someone had told me that I would survive such a night, I would have just twirled my finger at my temple. But that night was the epitome of horror and fear, and even in my worst nightmare, I couldn't imagine how it would end. Even now, long after this incident, I wake up in a cold sweat with my heart beating feverishly. I can't sleep after this, so I go for a cigarette and a bottle of whiskey. When the nicotine calms my nerves and the alcohol sends a welcome warmth through my veins, I can finally think more or less normally. I'm writing this because I know that all those people who read scary stories don't believe in them, but what I'm about to tell you happened in reality. Someone will think that all this is another terrible story about the morgue, but it is real, and I myself was a witness. That evening duty started as usual, a normal working day, or rather a night, a couple of corpses and you can safely go on a day off, but those customers were special. They were brought in on a broken down car. Usually in such cars they transport the bodies of homeless people decomposed to jelly, or the mummified remains of poor people who could not be found at the time. The corpses were unloaded. They were packed in double rubberized bags intended for the transport of biological remains. To be sure, they were wrapped in cellophane, tied with twine for more comfortable transportation. This very fact, for understanding people, spoke volumes. So, most likely, you will have to deal with decomposing using pus and worm-covered material. Not that this is new to me, but I would certainly prefer something simpler, you know. I don't want to be smeared from head to toe with the biological secretions of corpses. My subjects were wheeled into the room on a gurney. I was lucky, given that there were two bodies. The authorities assigned me a replacement pathologist to help me. Hugo was a good surgeon in the past, and it was considered a great success to get an appointment with him, until one day a patient died on his operating table. The forensic examination revealed violations during the operations and blamed Hugo for everything. He was removed from his post, but the love for the occupation of his whole life remained, so he got a job as a duty officer in the morgue. By the time I arrived, Hugo had already put on his work uniform and gloves, then a couple of minutes later added a protective mask. "What's the special occasion today?" I asked, carefully tying my apron around my waist. "I don't know yet. Two bodies. A man and a woman, found at the edge of the forest, at least 2 weeks old. The cause of death has not been determined." "Well, so now we will install the bro," I said with a smile, and went to the player standing on the window. He pressed a button and the sound of the radio filled the room. "Well, let's go," Hugo said, and began to unpack the dreadful bundle. When the bags were finished, a sad picture opened before our eyes. The corpses were in a terrible state, exuding a terrible stench. They were black as coal, from their bodies, more like jelly. A lot of liquid leaked out during transportation, emitting a pungent smell, vaguely resembling a mixture of rotten cheese and rotten vegetables. "Who are you taking, a man or a woman?" I asked Hugo. He shrugged, making it clear that he didn't care who he opened up. "Let's flip a coin. The tails will be a female corpse, and the heads will be a male one," I suggested. Flipping the coin, I watched with bated breath as it made several full turns and fell into my palm. Tails fell out, and so I had to explore the female body, and Hugo accordingly got a man. We got down to business. I had already made a cursory examination of the woman's body. She couldn't have been more than 30. Her body was slender, without a hint of excess weight. The police had seized her clothes for examination, so she lay in her pristine and rotting beauty. It did not escape my attention that her body was completely devoid of any insects, whether worms or larvae. I found myself thinking, sinfully, that even her stench was somewhat different from that of her fellow sufferer. "Juan, have you determined the cause of death yet?" Hugo exclaimed. I turned the music down and said, "No, I already did. The death of my ward was caused by ruptured aorta and numerous injuries to the neck and chest. Now I will conduct an autopsy, and I will be able to tell you something else," my partner told me. "And he also has no heart. It's like it was torn out by the roots from his chest." "This is quite strange," Hugo added quietly. I set to work with renewed zeal, making an incision and parting the chest in both directions, and then I saw that a sharp object, like an arrowhead, was sticking out of her heart. I took the tongs and pulled it out. It was the sharp part of a spear. and it was made of some unknown wood, strong and incredibly hard. Looking closer, I could see some tiny inscriptions on its surface, very similar to Latin. Here I am, Uber. They stabbed my client with a wooden stake, cruelly and inhumanly, I said, and went on working. Suddenly, it seemed to me that the body of the deceased woman became a little warmer. Not much, of course, but still. No, it couldn't be, I thought. A shiver ran through my body, and wanting to rid myself of doubts, I took out an electronic thermometer and applied it to the body of the corpse. When I waited for the proper time and looked at the readings, I almost fainted. Her body temperature was 33 degrees. I knew that the autopsy room has a powerful air conditioner, so the dissection room is no more than 20 degrees, which means that its temperature is an order of magnitude higher than that of the environment. To be honest, this is the first time I've encountered this in almost 15 years of work. There was clearly something wrong with this dead stranger. I decided to continue my research further, trying to ignore the warm, rotting muscle tissue of the girl's stomach. Its contents caused me, a seasoned and cynical pathologist, to vomit uncontrollably. Hugo ran up to me and asked excitedly, "Bro, why did you eat something wrong?" "No, I ate what I needed, but this thing definitely ate something wrong," I forced out, wiping my mouth with my sleeve. Igor bent over the cot and jumped back in shock, not believing his eyes. The dead girl's stomach was full of raw meat. Having put together a mosaic of pieces of flesh, I recognized in the resulting likeness the most important human organ, the heart. The thing had eaten him, not long before it died, and we both knew who its victim was. I felt uneasy. Thoughts of the mysterious object in the heart of the female corpse and the increased temperature, as well as the contents of her stomach, spun in my head like pieces of a diabolical puzzle. Suddenly, in the dissecting room, there was a sharp smell of ozone. The fluorescent lights flickered like crazy beacons. There was a crackling sound as if from high voltage, and the bulbs shattered as if they were filled with gunpowder. We were in total darkness. "Igor, we need to get out of here," I whispered softly. And then, we both heard that sound. It was like the fall of a lamb carcass from a Huckiness slaughterhouse. The hair on my head began to move, probably because of the horror they became cramped under the medical cap. In the ringing silence of the hall, there were timid footsteps, and then more confident shuffling footsteps. I backed away from the door, realizing that my partner was standing somewhere in the corner. "Igor, run. Run faster," I shouted, feeling that something unimaginable was about to begin. Taking my smartphone out of my pocket, I turned on the light and pointed it at the table where the dead woman lay. To our mutual horror, it was empty. "Where the hell did she go?" I said in a trembling voice, but Igor's heart-rending cry cut me off. It was filled with unbearable pain and agony. So shouts the doe, which is still alive, begins to tear apart a hungry lion. With a trembling hand, I pointed the beam of light at the source of the sound, and I shuddered with horror. My colleague was lying on the floor, and a dead thing was biting into his throat. She slept hungrily, growling in her throat as if she hadn't eaten in a million years. "You bitch," I shouted, grabbing the scalpel and running to her. It flashed its coal black eyes, and bared its mouth greedily. I have always handled the instrument with skill and was one of the best in my time on the course. I hit her right under the lower jaw, where there are a lot of blood vessels and carotid artery. I'll hit something. Like a bolt of lightning flashed through my head. But I didn't know that what is already dead is almost impossible to kill. The scalpel went into the jelly-like body, like a cup of jelly, but the undead did not even move an ear, but grabbed my hand, pulled it with a jerk. I've never felt such pain before. The taste of Igor's blood added strength to the dead woman, and her entrails spilled out of her stomach, which had been torn open during the autopsy, but this did not bother the corpse at all. In the mouth of this carrion, it was full of teeth, which instantly bit my hand in half, and it hung limply on a piece of skin, threatening to come off completely. With an incredible effort, I escaped from the clutches of the devilish creature, and crawled to the medicine cabinet. Opening it with one hand, I groped for the containers of alcohol. Sometimes after a particularly difficult day we drank it, with my unfortunate partner, but now apparently with Igor. It is no longer possible to sit at the same table. He was lying by the window, in a pool of blood, indifferent to everything that was happening. Because of the injury, I was in a state of shock, but the pain was gone, and I clearly knew what to do. "Come on, you damn thing. Come here." I beckoned to the foul-smelling creature, and it moved towards me, hot on its feet. I started throwing bottles of alcohol at her, and she squinted and made terrible grimaces. Soon, she was doused from head to toe. I felt like I was losing consciousness because of the blood loss, and then I set fire to a lump of paper and threw it at the dead thing. There was a bang and the alcohol vapor burst out with such force that the window panes in the hall immediately flew out. The undead rushed through the hall like a burning torch, letting out a guttural roar. It stank of burnt, rotten meat. The heat made my apron melt, spreading over my scarred skin. I woke up in intensive care, with 50% of my body burned, and a charred stump instead of my right arm. They say that from my partner Igor, there was only a handful of ashes and a dental crown. What it was, I still can't figure out. I was told that after the fire I set, the entire morgue and its wards were completely burned down. So the dead died a second time, and I hope that nasty thing is dead. In fact, she couldn't have survived in this heat, could she? At least, I really want to believe it. Creepy, isn't it? If you like this story, and if you are not afraid to hear even more scary stories, go to the channel and watch with pleasure, and also do not forget to subscribe, put likes and click on the bell, to learn about the latest stories first.